Good evening, all, and thank you for being here tonight for Yorktown's fourth Holocaust Remembrance Ceremony, and hello to those on TV and watching the recording of this. I would like to thank our clerk's office for doing such a great job on the decorating today, and I also want to thank Robin Steinberg in our planning department for working on our programs and getting that filled up. In addition, I'd also like to thank our participants, religious leaders, my fellow board members, our keynote speaker, Esther Geithels. Without their collaboration in this event, it would not be possible. And I'll thank the man behind the curtain, too, Tom, for recording this for us. Our Holocaust Remembrance event came to be after discussions between myself and our former town supervisor, Michael Grace. The conversation actually did not begin in the past, but rather with current events at the time. The reoccurring theme was based on the quote by a Spanish philosopher, Jorge Santayana. And his quote was, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Seeing what was happening in Syria, Yemen, the Sudan, and China is part of it. But this is the end result of a societal acceptance. It's not the root cause of the issue, and you only fix an issue by fixing the cause. Today we can add the Ukraine to this list. The atrocities that are happening there have actually been compared to the methods and modus operandi of the Germans under the Nazi Party. If looking to the past were enough, there are examples to choose from before the Holocaust even started. We could go back to the Inquisition, look at the plight of the Armenians in 1915 to 1923, there were also pogroms in Russia against the Jewish population in 1907 and 1908 that saw thousands killed for their religious beliefs. These pogroms led to my paternal grandparents moving here from what's now Pavlak, Ukraine. At the time, there were over 15,000 Jews living there. Many left during the Russian Civil War. But in 1941, the Nazis drove into Pavlak, had the remaining Jews in the town dig a mass grave, and then the Jews were executed, thrown in the graves, and buried. To this day, there are no Jews living in Pavlak. I want to repeat some words from the last two remembrance ceremonies. We need to look at the present. We should look at our political leaders and those who wish to serve. Are they talking about what they wish to do different, or are they trying to get you to hate the other person? We could look at our media and the responsibility of reporting rather than creating the dialogue. We could look at the populace to see if they are accepting the questionable without questioning it. We should look at all of this because this is a formula that has been used over and over. Since these words, we have had members of Congress and the New York Times criticized for anti-Semitic speech and cartoons. We have had multiple hate shootings at religious institutions and public venues. The governments that have performed these atrocities I spoke about have controlled the media, and the media have controlled the citizens. None of these crimes against humanity started overnight. They all started with a message of hate that was either accepted or received with indifference, and indifference can be the same as moral acceptance. Some nations were overrun by the Nazis and forced to accept these atrocities, but some nations were knowing participants. We are here tonight to remember the Holocaust and to keep alive the memories so that they are, at the least, a tool for future generations to look to when fighting against the hatred. The Holocaust did not start overnight. Hitler ramped up his hatred of Jews for 8 years before the more radical final solution was brought forward. Even today, the magnitude of what happened, 12 million murdered, 6 million of these Jews, which was 63% of the population of Jews living in Europe, 91% of Polish Jews, 87% of Greek Jews. These numbers are incomprehensible. They defy what our minds could wrap around as possible. That is why we must remember. Our first speaker, local resident Sam Matza, who's watching tonight and couldn't be with us. Hello, Sam and Perry. survived the Greek Holocaust. Our next two speakers were both from Budapest, Peter Somogy and Peter Volgi, and both of them had much different stories. In Hungary, over 559,000 Hungarian Jews, or 70%, perished in the Holocaust. Tonight you will hear Esther Geithels' story about being born in Lodz, Poland in 1929, her experiences in being sent to multiple concentration camps, and her escape during the infamous Death March. We are here to let our voices be heard that crimes against our fellow man are not acceptable and that we will never stand still for these actions in our society. We are here to light a candle for humanity, to serve as a beacon for our children to follow as they try to create a world of unity and peace. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call Rabbi Robbie Weiner to the podium for our benediction, or our invocation.
Blessing, it's all a catch-all. First off, I want to thank Ed for organizing this. It's a beautiful thing for our town to do this, and it's because of your leadership and your passion that this happens. So thank you so much, and thank you to the town board for allowing this to happen as well. Exactly 29 years ago from tomorrow, Elie Wiesel spoke at the opening of the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., in front of presidents and dignitaries. As a survivor and a Nobel Prize winner, he spoke of his experience in the Holocaust, and he tried to explain lessons for the world that were learned through this horrific historical event. When we hear Wiesel's words, we understand that Wiesel was trying to teach the world that the lessons learned from the Holocaust do not only apply to the years just following the atrocities. He challenged everyone to understand that the lessons from the Holocaust need to be heard and acted upon at every moment. He said, "We have learned some lessons, that we are all responsible, and indifference is a sin and a punishment. And we have learned that when people suffer, we cannot remain indifferent." From there, he begged the President of the United States to take a stand on Bosnia-Herzegovina. So for us today, Wiesel would not only demand that we see ourselves as responsible for the people of Ukraine, but it just doesn't end there. Wiesel was teaching us that the Holocaust demands that we not remain indifferent to the suffering of people of color, of the LGBTQ plus community, of the trans community. We must not be silent to our Asian brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, and our Muslim brothers and sisters. We must remain vigilant and steadfast for all those struggling within our borders and around the world. Ribono Shel Olam, O Master of the Universe, may we take the lessons that were uttered almost 30 years ago by one of your greatest of sages, and may we apply them today. May we be imbued with the power and spirit to speak up against all forms of injustice. And may the Holocaust always come to remind everyone that never again is only possible when we put into action, God, your powerful words from your scripture, "I am my brother's keeper." Amen.
At this time, we'll hear from our keynote speaker, Esther Geithels.
Hello again. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. to remember those people who perished so tragically. I was exactly 10 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland. I was born in Lodz, Poland, a big industrial city. I went to public school. My parents had a store of fruits and vegetables. They struggled, it wasn't easy. But I was loved by my grandma. I was the oldest granddaughter, so you can imagine, because I have grandchildren, so I know how it is. And I had a very, very happy childhood, but very short, up to 10 years. Once the Nazis invaded us, let me tell you, within a few weeks we felt it. The Polish hoodlums, there were a lot of Polish good people who helped us. They were hiding people, and they were good. But there were always hoodlums, no matter where you live. So I remember food became very scarce. And when we stood in line for bread, those hoodlums told the Nazis, "This is a Jew, this is a Jew," because they lived with us. They knew our faces. So they took us out from the line, I remember so vividly, and put us on the end. When we came to the end, there was no bread left. So I went home. My poor mother sent me, she said she was walking. It was horrible. This was in 1939. In 1940, they organized a ghetto for us. We were 360,000 Jews in Lodz, and they had a ghetto. And we started to move. We had to leave the city and go to this ghetto. This place was uninhabited for many years. We had no water there. We had a well. We had no toilets. We had nothing there. 4 or 5 people lived in one room, and food was so scarce. If you didn't have some money to buy on the black market something, you really starved, and a lot of people started to die of hunger. The ghetto lasted 4 years. I personally went into my 5th grade elementary school. And within a few months, they closed the schools for us. I had no education. But when we started school, this was already in the ghetto, and I remember that some teachers couldn't come, didn't want the job anymore. So they sent us a Hebrew teacher. This is the time when I learned my Hebrew alphabet, and I learned how to daven, to pray. And I remember going to her house because there was no more schools, but she took a few of us kids. She says, "If you want to come to my house, I will teach you." And she taught me. And you know something? After 50 years, I went to Israel. I have children there. I'm always in Israel. I came. We were a small group of people from Krakow, Poland, and we had an organization, and we supported a school in Tel Aviv, for people who couldn't afford high schools. So we helped them. And don't you think I met my teacher there in the school? She was still teaching, and I remembered her. She survived with her husband, and she was a teacher. She lived in Israel and was. So the ghetto started. It was terrible. What can I tell you? I was 11, 12 years old. I had to go to work in order for me to get the ration, which was very minimal. Some bread, some frozen potatoes. And you know something? The frozen potatoes tasted good too. I mean, it was such a hunger. It is so terrible, Your mind doesn't work if you're hungry, and you're hungry forever. It's not. My poor mother, I can see now how many times she took her ration of bread and she gave me another piece of bread. it lasted 4 years. My mother had to work, my father worked, and we lived in the same apartment. The ghetto closed right where we lived. So we belonged to the ghetto, so I stayed in our apartment. We stayed in our place, we didn't have to move. But you know, I remember I have a little brother, and the four of us slept in one big room, and we had a tiny kitchen. This was our, we are so spoiled. Thank God, we have so much here to be grateful for. Every child has a room, and the telephone never stops, and all those things. We did not have it. I tell you, before the war, I remember sleeping with my parents and with my little brother. My brother had a bed. I slept on a little couch there. We ate there. We slept there. And this was my life, but I was happy. I was loved. My God. My mother dressed me beautifully. I was happy till I was 10 years old. And then the Germans put us in the ghetto, and we had to work. Because the rations, the food rations we got a card that you're entitled to the food, or soup maybe during the day. And I started to work in a resort, in a tailor resort. They made beautiful dresses for the private industry in Germany, beautiful. And what did I do? We didn't have iron like we have here, electricity. You know, we put in the plug and the iron gets hot. I had to make sure that the irons were burnt. We put them on top of the iron with coal, and we had to start a fire there so the fire on the bottom gets hot. I got terrible headaches. I used to come home and I was sick. My mother couldn't understand what's happening. But luckily, I was very good with my hands, and I love to sew. And I went in and I started to finish the clothes. We had a president. We organized in the ghetto. We had a president. You heard of him. His name was Chaim Rumkowski. He meant well. He worked with Bibov. Bibov was the commander of the ghetto. And it was so lucrative for them. My God, we did so many wonderful things, work, for nothing. We got a few marks, which you can only use in the ghetto. It wasn't just among us. We had some paper money. And the rations were the same for everybody. And I started to sew dresses. Not sew, I finished dresses. And 4 years went by. It was very tragic. People were dying all the time for starvation, from sickness, It was terrible. I was lucky. I was 11, 12 years old. And my parents took care of us. I had a little brother. He got sick right away. He had, for malnutrition, he had, his breathing was hard. He had, the lungs took care of it. He did. Anybody knows Polish? Gruźlica. He had this, it's a sickness of the lungs. And he was sick. We always had to hide him. When we had segregations, when the police came, that we had to go downstairs, and they made segregations, and they took us away. They said we're going to a different camp. But we didn't go to a different camp. We went straight to the gas chambers. I remember we had, after the war, we found out that we had places there. And it was hell. It was literally hell. And 1944 came. They wanted to liquidate the ghetto. And we all had to leave they didn't want to leave any marks that they had a walking place in the ghetto. They wanted to eliminate and take everything apart, and we were all sent to Auschwitz. I came to Auschwitz with my mother and father, my little brother, my aunt, my uncle, my little cousin, and this was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. I remember there was not even place to sit in the train. We went in cattle cars, and we didn't have any room to sit. So I was sitting, my mother and father stood up, and I was laying down on my mother's feet. And we came from Lodz to Auschwitz, which was Oświęcim in Poland, was about a 4-hour drive. And we drove in those cattle cars without water, without anything, for 2 days and 2 nights. Finally, they opened it, and we were in Auschwitz. All I remember is the green uniforms, the Germans with the green uniforms and the high boots, and they always had the German shepherds next to them. And all the dirty work the inmates did. They wore some special uniforms, like stripes, a stripe uniform they had. And they started, get out of there, get out, fast, fast, fast. And we came down, and they directed us to men separate, men go on this side, women and children on the other side. But schnell, schnell, everything was schnell. And the Germans stood there and watched us. And my father went to the men. My mother stood with me and my little brother. My mother noticed a neighbor of ours who lost his wife in the ghetto of starvation. And I don't know how he saved this little girl. He had a girl who was about 4 or 5 years old. And he didn't know what to do with this child because men didn't have any children. My mother, she was a saint. She went over, she took the child's hand, and she said to our neighbor, let me take care of her. I will take care of her. And we stood in line. And then we had to line up singularly. So I stood alone. First was my mother with the little girl, and then I was, and then my little brother was, and then I came. I remember so vividly, I'll never forget this. Mengele stood in front of us, and he said to my mother, is this your kind? Is this your child? My mother said yes, because she couldn't let the child send. She couldn't leave the child alone. And she said, yeah. And he motioned her to the left. My little brother was very weak, not weak, but he was like a skeleton, what can I tell you? And he motioned my little brother there. He looked at me, and he sent me to the right. And I started to cry. No, I want to go to my mother. And I started to run on the other side. Out of nowhere, a woman, an inmate who was keeping order there, stood in front of me. And she saw me that I wanted, any further. He says, in Polish, she spoke to me, don't you dare move from here. Not only did she say I shouldn't go there, but she just blocked my way. She stood in front of me. She wouldn't let me go any place till the whole group on the left went. They went straight to the gas chambers. And I was transferred to the bathhouse. I didn't have a shower. They sprayed us with some powder like you do for animals. And they took all our clothes. We shouldn't have anything with us. And they threw at us a dress and a pair of heels, shoes with heels. I was 14 years old at the time, and I got a party dress, pink, no underwear, no shoes. I got a pair of high heel shoes. I couldn't walk in them, so I was always barefooted and I got blisters. And I was like this, and I went to my barrack. I was 6 weeks in Auschwitz, in Birkenau. People were nice to me, I can't say it, because the camaraderie among us was good. They saw a child, you know, and I was alone, so everybody had pity on me. I always had somebody who watched over me. And I was like this for 6 weeks in the bunk. The bunk was terrible. We lay like 6 people. 6 women were on a bunk bed. There were 3 levels. I think I was on the higher level. And we had to stay on the side. On the side we used to stay. We couldn't lay flat because there was no room for us. And they tortured us, 5 o'clock in the morning, Zählappell. They counted us. We stood in the frost. Don't forget, Europe, and I came to Auschwitz the end of August. This was already August, September, October. It was getting cold. And 5 o'clock in the morning, Zählappell. We had to go out. They counted us. Only this was pure torture. And then we got some coffee, so to speak, but it was not coffee, and a slice of bread, I remember. And we didn't go to work. They didn't know what to do with us. And they sent out people all the time. They made selections and they sent away people from Auschwitz. I met my mother's first cousin in Auschwitz, and she was supposed to go to a different camp. That's what they called it. And she said to me, please, she says, they did it alphabetically. So she had a different, I had a different, she says, change your name here, but it doesn't matter, they don't know anything. And I was brought up to go the straight way. You know, this I have to say. And I says, I go with you. I'm not supposed to go with you. I have to stay here because only the people with this in those letters have to go. And I didn't want to go. I just said, no, I'm going to stay here because if they catch me, I just couldn't lie. And she didn't survive. She went straight to some place, and we lost her. And from Auschwitz, they sent me to Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen, it was so horrific that my mind couldn't take those punishments and those things because I don't remember. And I saw my friends had the same thing. They never remembered the travel from one camp to another. It was so horrible. If any of you read Elie Wiesel's Night, and he says there, he writes very well about this, about moving from one place to another with his father. And we came to Bergen-Belsen. There was no room for us because the place in Bergen-Belsen was taken up by the Hungarian people. The Hungarian people came to Auschwitz in the summer of 1944. So everything was this. You know what they did? They put up tents for us. Tents. Like you go on a picnic in the summer and you have a tent to go in. This is and a blanket. And we stayed in we went in those rooms, in the tents. And I remember we got a blanket to cover ourselves. And I remember I cut a piece of blanket to cover my feet because I had blisters and I was so cold. And I got a beating. You're ruining Germans' property. You are so terrible. I got a beating for putting a piece of blanket on my feet, so I took it. I celebrated my 15th birthday in Auschwitz. I remember I was 15 years old. In Bergen-Belsen, I met a woman from Hungary, and she says, I will take care of you. Come, stay with me. And we hugged each other. We rubbed our backs to stay warm. And she was very nice to me. And she read my palm. She said, you'll survive. You're going to have a good life. And I was cuddling with her. And I slept. I got up in the morning. She was dead next to me. I was holding on to a dead person. And I couldn't do nothing. And I went to Zeilapel. And from Bergen-Belsen, we went to Rochlice. This was in Czechoslovakia. And this was already good because we went into an indoor. We had a roof over our heads, but we still slept on the floor. No snow mattress, no straw mattresses or anything, nothing, just on the floor. And we worked in ammunition factories, I remember. And as the armies, by then, this was already the beginning of 45, so Poland was already invaded by the Russians, and the America came to help the Russians, so the American army was, and oh my God, when I talk about it, I just don't understand how people can do it to one another. What? People who don't read and don't remember, it's terrible. Okay, so from Rochlice, they took us again because the armies were advancing and they had to empty, no camps anymore. We went on the Dead March. The Dead March, we were going around small villages, and I have a name for this. We were skeletons in rags. People, the farmers, because we went in a rural area, so people used to say, hey, who are they? What are they? Are they human beings? We didn't resemble any human beings. We were skeletons in rags. We were scary. No water, we ate the snow for water, no food. And we were going from place to place, around. They didn't know what to do with us. They tortured us. It would be easier for us to be shot and get it over with. But we didn't have that luck. So I was with 4 other girls. I was the youngest. And we decided when we were lucky, if we were lucky, the farmers used to let us into the barn. So on the bottom, you had the animals, the pigs, the whatever they had, and on top where they keep the food for the animals, we went upstairs to the high loft, we stayed. And I came up with an idea. I says, how about tomorrow, if they call us to come down in the morning to march on, we stay here, and if they catch us, they will shoot us, and this will be over, and we wanted it. Well, morning came, they didn't look for us, they marched on. When it got very quiet, we came down from the high loft, and the farmer was shocked. What are you doing here? And we told them that we overslept, and we asked him which way did they go. And he showed us this way. So when we were out of his sight, we took another road. And we saw signs to go to Czechoslovakian little towns. They had farms there. And we came to this place, and we told them that we Polish girls. We didn't identify as Jews. We told them that we were from Poland. We were in a concentration camp, and we just escaped from it. They were wonderful. First few days we stayed in the barn. They gave us fresh clothes, and they started to feed us, so we got sick because our stomachs couldn't take any fresh milk from the cows. And it took a few days, but we were all young, and we bounced back. And then each family took one of us in. So I remember I came into a house. This was 1945. It was a small house, elderly people. They had a girl a little older than I was, just one child. They had no electricity. And we had an after lamp, that's it. And they were wonderful to us. And a few weeks later, they told us that the Russians came, they took over. But they didn't want us to go out and see the soldiers. They said, you stay here. The Russians had a very bad name, that they were raping kids and this. So we stayed. And then something happened. The zoning changed. So the Russians left, and the Americans came. The Americans came, and we were allowed to go out and greet the American soldiers. So we didn't know a word of English. Nobody spoke English. We spoke Polish, Yiddish. And I remember I says, is there anybody here in Yiddish? I says, is there anybody that speaks Yiddish? And of course we had a few Jewish soldiers, and they were nice to us and this. And they told us not to go back. The war is over, they told us. And they said, don't go back to Poland. There's still a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland. They still have pogroms. They're afraid that we're coming back and we want our apartments back. And they don't want to give anything up. So, oh my God. Don't go any place. Try to come to America. Go any place, but not to Poland. Of course, we didn't listen because we found out that there were gas chambers all over and the people died. But we didn't want to do this. I wanted to see. We went back to Poland. I came to Lodz. It took us a week or so. No money, nothing. And we traveled from train to train, It took us a while till we came to Lodz. And I had a gmina, a organization for the people who came back to Lodz. And I went there, I gave my name, and I asked if they know of anybody by that name. My uncle lived in Lodz already. He was liberated in January of 45, so by the Russians. So he was there. So somebody took me to my uncle, and I stayed with my uncle. 2 months later, I was out. And my father came back. My father was in Dachau, and he was sick. So after liberation, they took him to the hospital, and he came out. And he came to Lodz too. He was looking for my mother, and he was looking for us. But my mother never came back. My mother was 37 years old, and she died because of this child. But I'm proud. I'm just that I had a mother like this. She wouldn't let the child's hand go. She held this child by the hand. This child was safe to the gas chambers. So we were in Poland. We wanted to leave. The only way we could immigrate was if we were in a DP camp, displaced persons camp place, so we can register to America, to wherever you wanted to go. It took a while, but the UNRWA, the Hayas, They were very good to us, really. We lived in private houses, but a group of us was I was in Lampertheim, between Frankfurt and Mannheim, if anybody knows Germany. So we were there, and I was 17 years old already, and I met a survivor from Krakow, a young man. I was 17, he was 25. He did some business with my uncle, and we got to know each other, and we became girlfriend and boyfriend. We were so lonely, everybody needed somebody. But this was my husband for 51 years, the most wonderful human being and once he comes, he says to me, Esther, I have an affidavit, I'm going to America, I got already the tickets. He says, well, how about you? Are you registered any place? I says, no, I didn't know. My father didn't know what to do. So he had an idea, 25-year-old man. He says, let's go to the American consulate in Frankfurt and tell them our story, and let's see if they can help us. I just, how he thought of that. And we came to the American consul in Frankfurt. We had an interpreter, and the consul came in. And he looks at me and he says, so, you want to come to America? We'd love to have you. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving Day. We're giving thanks to everybody. The country gives thanks for how wonderful we are, what a wonderful country we live in. And we'd love to have you in America. How old are you? I said, I'm 17. He says, just sign your name, and I fill out the application for you. You're going to be there within a few weeks of your boyfriend. And you know something? He kept his word. A few weeks later, I came to Hamburg. Was it Hamburg? Hamburg, yes. And I came with Marine Perch on Valentine's Day, 1947. This is very good because I'm very emotional and I'm very, very loving. I love people. And I came on Valentine's Day. Of course, my boyfriend was waiting for me at the ship. And right away, I wanted to go to school. I says, my God, I don't know a word of English. And ever since, I talk to American people here. I see everybody. I've never had a bad day in my life since I'm in America. We struggled. I had to go to work. I had to help. I was married at 18, and my husband, my late husband, survived with 4 sisters and 1 brother, which is very unusual. So we rented an old house, and I stayed with the sisters. I went to school and I went to work. I had to contribute to the food. So I asked people, where can I find a job? So I remember we always had friends around us, really. It's to the wedding. I was married in a very Orthodox place in Brooklyn. And where was it? I forgot already. So our neighbor took me. We couldn't afford a taxi. So he took us to the Chuppah to have the wedding. So we started life here. You wouldn't believe it. My husband came from Krakow, a very prominent family, and they had a printing and school supplies. And my husband, not knowing a word of English, wanted to open a printing. So he went to the bank and he says, listen, I just came to this country, I want to open a printing. I rented an old house, and I will put a press down in the basement, and we sleep up there, and we live up in the upper floors. We were about 8 or 9 people, 1 bedroom. And I slept with my sister-in-law on the... during the day it was an office, and at night we opened the couch and I slept there with my sister-in-law till we were married. You know, we didn't do the things that you young people do today. So we wanted to, but we didn't. And then we rented a place, and everybody we went to work. So I asked somebody about the job. So she looked at in the papers, and she says, Henry Bendel needs somebody finishing dresses. And Henry Bendel is Henry Bendel. Did I know that he was one of the nicest places on Fifth Avenue? And I went there and I got a job. It's no problem. And I was working there. And then I changed jobs and I went to school right away. And we were married. 2 years later, I had my first son. And then I had another son. And then I had my daughter. So my older son is an attorney. What else? A doctor or a lawyer, no? And my middle son was an accountant. And my daughter was a registered nurse, a pediatric nurse. She was teaching the young mothers how to breastfeed. She had a very high position. She just retired recently. And I remember carrying my little boy in my arms, and I went with an agent from a real estate company, and I bought a little bungalow in New Hyde Park on the border of Nassau and Queens and Nassau. My next door neighbor was in Nassau County. And we bought a house for $12,000, a little bungalow. And my husband was very handy, and he started a printing without knowing the language. How do you like that? He succeeded. We were in business for 50 years. A lot of people made a living because of that place. And we had a wonderful life here. Unfortunately, my husband was a chain smoker. He died of lung cancer at the age of 7. He died on his birthday. On his 77th birthday, he died of lung cancer. And he did so much. He initiated, he says, if we want, people should remember the Holocaust, we have to start with students. And he started to go to schools to speak about his experience. He wasn't on Schindler's List, but he was in the camp where Schindler's List was originated, you know. So he succeeded in business little by little because he was an angel. My son, Ben Geithels, people know him. We talked about Elie Wiesel. You know how many times he kissed me on both sides? We were on the committee to build a museum in Washington. I was in the White House when Clinton was in the White House. All the survivors who took care on building the museum were invited to the White House. Clinton was there. I remember there was a table with kosher on it for us, and we were there. I met such wonderful people. I met Clinton. I can give you, America is my soul, heart and soul, really. I love this country because they were nice to me. I had an opportunity to get an education. All my children were well educated. I have, like I said, my son is a lawyer, and then I have an accountant. He went to City College, and my daughter is a pediatric nurse. My middle son, went with us to Israel. And he said, he came home, he says, Mom, I'm sorry, but I have to go to Israel. I have to help. It's a new country. After what you and Daddy went through, I want to live in Israel. I want to go. He went there on Yom Kippur War, and he's still there. I'm very proud of him. He has a beautiful family, and unfortunately, he doesn't feel, he has also a condition with his lungs. He's not well. But thank God he's holding on. He has excellent help there. And married, 3 wonderful children. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren in Israel. Sabras, all born in Israel. And I have, believe it or not, I have 5 great-grandchildren, Sabras in Israel. And they're so cute, and they all want to see Savta. And Savta was there when, just before the pandemic started. I can't go now. My son doesn't want me to come. He says, Mom, at your age, I'm only 92 years old. So he says, with your age, you're going to catch something. I don't want you to go. No, not yet. You cannot come. So I have a wonderful daughter-in-law. My son here is well established. And here I have also 2. I have also, Mia has 2 children, and I forgot already. My granddaughter here, who lives in Washington, D.C., has 2 little girls, and my son has 1 son. So I have 3 great-grandchildren here in America. And I have all my grandkids are here. They are well established. They have beautiful places. They're smarter than we were. They go on vacations every few months, but vacation. I have to go here, I have to go there. Go Gesundheit, I say. Go. Enjoy, just go. And they're wonderful to me, really wonderful. So you heard my story. If you have any questions, tell me. I am a very, very contented person. I worry a little too much. Yeah, I don't know. I can't help it. It's a Jewish mother. What can I do? And that's it. Oh, please. I thank you. You're embarrassing me. I don't deserve it. Please. I just told you, if you have any questions, I would appreciate, ask me, and if I can, I will answer it. Everybody knows everything, yes.
What happened to your father when you went?
My father came here, I brought him here.
Okay.
Yes. And unfortunately, he married a woman who didn't like me, my stepmother. And no matter what I did, I had already children of my own, and she was kvetching all the time. You don't do anything good for your father. You don't come. I wanted them to come. I sent a taxi. It was, at the time, was $25. It was a lot of money for me because we struggled for a long time. But I had 2 children in school. I have a baby. So I sent a taxi. And you come. You don't have to pay for it. If you don't pick us up, we don't go. We don't come. So I went to Brooklyn, brought them home, had lunch, then made supper. And she was sitting there, and my stepmother. And she complained. I don't do too much for my father. I don't do anything. I don't know. I don't want to. She passed away, and my father, he didn't leave a will or anything. They had some money, and my father always said he didn't have a will or anything. So they had 2 children. My father was only 40 years old when the war ended. So he got married to this woman, but she didn't like me. I didn't do enough for them. So what can you do? Not everybody can like you. Yes. Oh, I am documented in Spielberg's. Spielberg has a show out this, and I was talking to them, and you can hear me the same speech you can see on the computer. I'm all over the place. I spoke for Rabbi Golub in the Jewish station, and he's wonderful, and I'm honored, really. He is our lady, our president of our organization, she runs it like a clock, really. If you need a speaker, if you need anything, you call this organization, Millie Jaspin. And she has wonderful people who work with her. They give you people to speak, people who need help or whatever. Wonderful. This is Millie. Millie, you are it. And what else can I tell you? I'm very busy. Next week I'm going to speak in 2 places. I'm getting them. You have a medical school here in Valhalla. The students who start school in September come to me before to listen to my story because they want to know how the health affected me. So I have 4 or 5 young medical students in my house. They come to my house, and I speak to them. This is already goes on for a few years, yes. And I try to help. I try to do and speak about it. My daughter, she doesn't want me to do it. She says, "Mom, you're tired. You don't feel good. Stop talking." I says, "Jackie, I cannot sit home." And Elie Wiesel told us that we should never refuse. We were friends. We were on the same committees building all those places. So he told us, remember, he says, no matter how old you get and whatever you do, don't refuse if anybody wants to listen what happened to us. Don't say no. And I stay by this. No matter, thank God, my mind is still okay. I hope. Yes, it's okay?
Wonderful.
So, thank you.
There's a question down here from young man.
Yes.
Charlie, what's your question, Charlie?
How old are you? You know, I have a 6-year-old little grandson in Israel. His name is Ofer. And he's just like you. He looks like you. How are you? What do you want to ask me?
What's your mom and dad's name?
What?
Your mom and dad's name.
What was your mom and dad's name?
Oh, my father was Israel. My mother was Bluma, like a rose, you know. Mm-hmm. So this was Polish names. And you are very handsome, you know that? What is your name?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie, I have my number is Charlie. I have a Charlie.
It's very nice meeting you.
My grandson is on Wall Street. What else?
Yeah.
He's a banker. He became a banker. He graduated. He has his master's from Manhattan School of Music. He had a master's degree from there. So he got his master's degree, and he says, "What am I doing now?" He's piano. Mm-hmm. And he said, "What am I going to do now?" He went on the computer, took a course in financing, and went to Wall Street. And he does fine. They're very, very hardworking young. They contribute to society. They're good people. I told you my mother's cousin, she wanted me to the Holocaust. Just because I was taught by my mother, you know, always say what you mean, don't lie to anybody. And this was in my head when I was 15 years old. And I didn't want to go with them because I was afraid. interviewed by Spielberg, by all the things. I'm in a few books. And I have wonderful friends. I mean, I look at my albums and I see I was so many wonderful friends, so many wonderful friends. Politicians and non-politicians.
So,
We want to thank you very much.
This is so
If
beautiful.
I may call you Esther.
Esther, please.
Okay.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome. The story is absolutely wonderful. It's not a wonderful story, but the way you tell it, it couldn't be better. And I want to thank you, and I learned a lot from all of this.
You're welcome.
An awful lot. Thank you.
Esther, we also have a few people who came to see you from the political community as well. Maybe it might not be the White House, but you never know where they'll be in the future, I guess. So at this time, State Senator Pete Harkum, if you'd like to come up, and I will also mention that I'm sorry, Millie is from the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center in White Plains. They are the ones they help with programs like this all the time. So, if you're interested, on their website, take a look, and you could actually support programs like this. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, a great resource why we have it available for us, and we thank Millie, we thank your organization so much, and especially Betty, who helped me through this whole process. Pete, if you'd like to go to the mic.
Ed, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Excellent job hosting and putting this together, and Supervisor and Madam Clerk and Town Board. This is really an important event. Billy, I'm at a loss for words, and my business is words.
Stay next to you.
Yes, please. I've been to the museum in Washington. I've been to the memorial in Israel.
Yad Vashem.
Yeah, I went to one of the camps that's still there outside of Munich, and as moving as those were, they could not prepare me for your story here today. And it's so important
To
that
remember.
yes, that we remember and we tell these stories, because unfortunately the Holocaust is not taught properly and enough in our schools, and it's created this vacuum where
We brought it to schools.
I know, I'm glad you do, because it's not in our curriculum, and it creates this vacuum for anti-Semites and conspiracy theorists and deniers on social media. And it's the worst atrocity known to man, and we cannot forget that. We cannot forget the lives, and in the survivors like you, there is hope. And so,
I hope. I have many, many letters. I think, I don't know what to do with them. Maybe I'll give it to Millie. Hundreds of letters that I speak to children. I do it for the last 20 years.
oh, God bless you. God bless you.
And I touch a lot of people. I spoke in Haifa University in Israel. Israel is very dear to me.
Here,
because
speak into the mic so the
Yeah.
TV can hear you.
I go to Israel often because my son lives there. So I spoke in Haifa University, and I told them my story. So a young student from America came over to me. He says, "Thank you for your story." He says, "You made my mind up. I'm going to remain in Israel. Israel belongs to us." And let me tell you, they have a very good life. The Arabs, the Israeli Arabs. My son lives there. My son is very liberal, and if he needs something, he goes to an Arab. He doesn't, He complains to the government that they don't do enough for the Israeli Arabs, but it's not so. They get everything. If they want to work and they want to be nice people, they don't want to kill anybody, they accept it. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the New York State Senate and
The New York Senate?
New York State Senate. We want to thank you for everything you do,
Oh, my
and
God.
God bless you.
This
Thank
is
you.
for me?
This is for you. Yes. Thank you. Let's do a little photo. We'll do a little photo. Here you go. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like me to set this on the table?
Yes, please.
All right.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful frame. I put it in my new porch. I just did the porch.
Oh, nice.
I put it there.
Thank
Made
you.
a special one.
God bless you.
Oh,
Thank you.
I thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you again for coming.
So next, I'd like to invite up our town supervisor, Matt Slater, who also has a proclamation for you. We're a little more responsible with our tax dollars, so we don't have quite the same framing. See?
How about why don't you light the candles?
We're going to do that in just a moment. That's the next part.
Esther, I brought up your boyfriend, Charlie.
Come on, Charlie. Stay next to Grandma.
Come here.
I'm Grandma.
Why don't we stand right over here? Well, I just wanted to take a moment on behalf of our community, Esther, to just thank you so much. When I came in today and first met you, I told you that I brought Charlie with me. And you told me that it was too sad of a story for him to hear. But I think that it's important for Charlie, for Liam, who's here, for all the children of our community and the community of the world to understand what you endured. And my hope and my belief is that by teaching them and having them hear these stories, they'll know what not to do. They'll know the importance of humanity, the importance of love. And your words today were so profound and impactful. And I just really want to thank you on behalf of our community for sharing them with us today. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm grateful that you came, really, that you're interested in it. Thank you so much. And you too, Charles. Thank you. You have school tomorrow?
Yes, he does.
So you go to bed early.
Yes, he will. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was down in New Orleans, and I was at the National World War II Museum, and the living history component is so critical, not just for children, but for adults as well. And when I went through the exhibits, anytime there was a video being played, whether it was a video that was focused on the Holocaust or a video relating to D-Day or any of the videos that were there, everyone just stopped and listened. And I really want to thank my colleague, Councilman Lachterman, for putting this program together, because your words are going to live on for decades and decades to come.
You remember Grandma Esther?
Yes, you will. So I just wanted to also thank Councilman Lachterman, but again, on behalf of our entire community, I do have a proclamation. I can get it framed for you for your porch if you'd like. On behalf of our community, thank you so much for sharing your words with us and your wisdom.
Thank you so much.
And we wish you nothing but the best, and God bless you.
Can I get a hug?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I want to get a hug too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. Oh, take care of him. Does he go to school already?
Oh yeah, he goes to school. Yeah. Can we get a quick photo right here?
Nursery?
Here, Charlie, we're gonna do this. Yeah.
Oh.
Look at mommy.
Okay.
Yeah, Charlie, what grade are you in? He's in the first grade.
The first grade
Yes,
already?
he is.
Wow.
Yes, he is. And so I know his friend Liam here is also in the first grade, Councilwoman
right.
Howard's son, and I know he's going to be telling all of his friends tomorrow about this whole thing. Thank you.
He's going to be supervisor in 30 years.
No, he's smarter than that.
Thank you, Supervisor Slater. Is New York Medical still doing the program with the students going over to Ramat Aviv, Israel, for the shared medical program? In New York Medical, are they still sending students to Israel to study at the University of Ramat Aviv?
They want to.
Yeah, my friend Jeff did that when he was in medical school there.
Oh, where? In Israel?
Well, yeah, he went to Israel for a year of his training.
Where
The University of Ramat Aviv in Tel Aviv.
Ramat Aviv. It's
Yeah.
near Tel Aviv.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, he loved it. It was. Well, he's out a couple of years, and he's a radiologist out on Long Island. So we're going to light some candles, and actually each of these 6 candles have significance. And Esther, the first one is for you to light. It is honor of survivors, and let me come over and help you out with that. We're going to move these so no one sets them on fire.
Thank you so much for the lovely flowers and everything. I don't know.
So, yeah. I'll do it.
Yes.
I'll do it.
You do.
This here. Yeah, so our first candle lit is in honor of our survivors. Our next one is actually a little different this year. We are doing this in honor of those of the Ukraine, and I have asked Roy Sokol to join us, who is also Ukrainian of Ukrainian descent. And Roy, if you could come up and light the second, and if you don't mind, I didn't put myself on the program, but in honor of my paternal grandparents, I'd like to.
Thank you for inviting me. And your story is going to be burned in my heart and in my soul forever. Thank you for today. God bless you.
Our next one will be lit in honor of our armed forces, and I'm going to ask the Honorable Tony Grasso, who served in Europe post World War II in part of the Reconstruction, and I'm also going to ask. I know you weren't prepared for it, but Jim Ratchmit, in honor of your son who served in the 82nd Airborne, and the 82nd Airborne actually came in and they were responsible for liberating a concentration camp. Please join Mr. Grasso in lighting the candle.
You were liberated.
Thank you. Jimmy, come on up with time, please. Jimmy, step up with Tony, please. Yep. And I want to thank you both for lighting that in honor of the armed forces. Are there any other military in the room right now? Oh, Eugene Lang, thank you. Who Charlie just reminded me, and Roy. So, gentlemen, thank you for your service as well. It means the world. So I thank Charlie. In addition to helping out, he reminded me that I missed Uncle Michael, and looked right past the candle for the legacy of families of survivors. And today we have a first-generation survivor here in Michael Grace, and a second-generation survivor in Eugene Lang. And if the two of you could come up and please light the candle in honor of the families of our survivors. It's good. It lights. You're good.
Oh, why did you go to England?
She went to England.
I know all about it.
Yeah, no, they had
amazing generation.
Everybody had somebody, yes. By the way, 15 million people were perished in the Second World War, not 12. 15 million. Among them were the 6 million.
So the death toll 15 million in, I'm told now, from World War II. So our next candle to me is one of the most important. I thank the Gusikovs because both Lillian and Jack have been here for every Holocaust Remembrance event. But this is a candle in honor of tomorrow's children. We cannot forget these lessons. They are just too important, and one of the reasons we do this, while we all benefit from it and learn, it's our children that need to carry these thoughts forward and fight evil as it is there. So at this time, I'd like to ask Lillian and Jack Gusikov, Charlie Slater, and Liam, would you like to come join them? I didn't know you were coming today. Why don't you come up and join Charlie, and you will light a candle for the children.
How old are you? Oh, you're so beautiful.
Guys, stand together at the candle, please.
Tell me, how did you listen to my story?
Yes, it was really good.
How about you?
Yes.
Yes, do you remember it?
Yes.
Please be kind to each other. You don't need makeup. You're so beautiful. I really mean it. Wait, the makeup on you as old as I am, you use makeup. But you're so beautiful. Those young people, they use twirling makeup. Look at those beautiful faces.
For our last candle of the evening, this is in honor of all the victims of hate. And I will ask at this time our town board to come up, Father Gianderco and Rabbi Weiner to approach. As leaders in our community, both politically and religious leaders, it is very, very important. And actually, you know what? We have the two chairmen of our committees here, our Democratic committee and our Republican committee. Can you gentlemen come up and join? I think this is something that we would all be unified in, and it's extremely important. And when we are done, Father Gianderco will do a prayer over the candles as well. Thank you, Matt. Okay, at this time we will have a final prayer over the candles by Father Monsignor Gianderco. Sorry about that. I demoted you.
I'm still Father. All right. Let us pray. Dear Lord, there have been times of great darkness in this world you have created, and much of the darkness comes from the hearts of the wicked. As we remember the Holocaust of the 20th century, we recall that it is only you, the Lord our God, who can turn back their evil upon them and destroy them for their wickedness. We cannot comprehend, Lord, why you allow the suffering, but we know that only you can heal the human heart. Many times you have intervened throughout history to save your people. We ask you to continue to give us strength in time of suffering and hope in the power of your mercy. Once again, in our day, we see evil strike the innocent. When we are able to alleviate suffering, give us the courage to help those in need. Help us to fight against evil with good and to never forget what can happen when evil tries to overcome life itself. When we recall the horrible evil and terrible suffering of the Holocaust, as we do this evening, let us vow that we shall never turn away from those who suffer. Truly, when one suffers, we all suffer. Show us your grace, which is always more powerful than evil and sin. Even in the darkness, as we light candles to reflect your light, help us to know that you are always at our side. May sinners vanish from the earth and the wicked be no more. Bless the Lord, my soul. And as we hear in the book of Numbers, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance and give you peace. Amen. Amen.
So, on behalf of our town, I would like to thank Esther for being here tonight and sharing her story. I also want to thank you all for coming here tonight, and I will also add a special thank you to a true lover of history who helped me out greatly today in bringing Esther up, Paul Martin, who is a member of our historical society and works with a lot of living history, so he understands the importance of today's event. Thank you, Paul. But I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Life is a precious thing, and tonight we heard a story from a woman that knows that more than any. It is important that we know what life is and we embrace it. It is important that we share this as well. I cannot tell you how important that is. When you look at lack of respect for life in the world today and the reasons that people are killed, it's hard to comprehend how we get to that point. I think that it lies in the teaching, or should I say the lack of it. It is why we as a group have brought this program to you, so that we can remember where certain paths will lead. That spirit and that desire to hear this story and share this story is why you have all come, so that we can spread the message of love and life instead of hate and death. It is only by this desire and this remembrance that hopefully will keep our children following the light instead of falling into darkness. God bless you all, and thank you for coming today. Esther, thank you.
Ed, if I could, just real briefly, folks, I also want to thank everybody for coming tonight, number one. Esther, as Mr. Sokol had said, your story is burned into our hearts, our minds, and our souls. This is at what number? 4. This is our 4th Holocaust Remembrance ceremony. I was at the first one, and the rest of them, including this one. Every time I go to these, I learn something. You can see this on TV. You can read about it. You can talk about it to people, but until you hear it from a survivor, you don't understand it. And I want to thank all of you for coming and keeping this alive. It's unfortunate that we have to do this because of what has happened, the tragedies that happened with this. I also want to thank Ed Lachterman. This guy here works at this tirelessly. He does a hell of a job, and thank you, Ed, for doing this for us and for the community.
It's for me as well. Thank you. That concludes our program. Thank you all once again, and God bless.